Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into something that might just make you question reality a little bit. We're unpacking a highly provocative 2005 philosophical text by an author named Xu Feng, titled The Trajectory of Life. We're going to go on a pretty wild ride here, zooming all the way out to the edges of the cosmos, and then right back down to the nitty-gritty of your morning routine. The big idea we're tackling, the premise that absolutely everything in the universe runs on a predetermined set track. And look, when Xu Feng says everything, he literally means everything. He makes this argument that whether we're looking at the macro level, massive galaxies swirling around, complex solar systems, or even just the clouds outside your window right now, down to the absolute micro level, like tiny atoms and electrons, they all share one fundamental rule. They're all locked onto a specific track. He points out that meteorologists can predict the weather weeks in advance, right? And that's exactly because clouds follow these moving tracks. If they didn't, the author argues, it'd just be chaos. Rain would randomly dump over deserts and turn them into jungles overnight. So it really begs the question, are we just floating freely through existence, making it up as we go, or are we, too, following a hidden track? It's so easy to look up at a cloud and think, oh, it's just blowing randomly in the wind. But Xu Feng wants us to completely rethink that assumption. And more importantly, he's challenging us to re-examine the mechanics of our very own lives.
Part 1, the human track. Let's zoom in on your life for a second.
Because this philosophy gets deeply, deeply personal. The text claims that human lives are entirely embedded within these predetermined trajectories. According to Xu Feng, the absolute core attributes of your existence, your gender, your race, your social status, your wealth, whether society sees you as noble or humble, and, even the exact times of your birth and death are 100% determined by your specific life trajectory. In fact, he says that whenever you look back at your past, what you are really looking at is just the unchangeable line of your personal trajectory.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room. How much control do we actually have? Xu Feng hits us with this rapid-fire barrage of rhetorical questions to basically poke holes in our modern obsession with absolute free will. For example, can you become a billionaire just by working really hard? If you don't believe in these set trajectories, he basically dares you to try. And he warns that you might just get battered by the harsh reality of your predetermined path.
And he definitely doesn't stop there. He asks the reader point blank, can you just wake up and decide to be a president? Can you just decide to be as incredibly elegant as James Bond, 007? Or what about becoming the next Jet Li? Or as globally famous as Madonna? The argument here is super punchy. If you really think you can simply choose these extraordinary outcomes, go ahead and try. But when you inevitably can't, well, you have to ask yourself why not.
Because of this, the author takes a really hard line against the whole self-help industry and this culture of idolizing success. Reading a stack of celebrity biographies or studying success manuals won't actually change your track one bit. We might get fiercely jealous of movie stars or super frustrated when a coworker gets that promotion and we don't. But the text argues that it doesn't matter how intensely you study success or how hard you vow to change, you simply cannot jump onto someone else's predetermined track. It's like that old proverb he references, man proposes, God disposes. Section 2. The engine of karma, thermodynamics, and cause and effect. Okay, so let's break down how Xu Feng defines karma, because it is highly specific and honestly pretty unique. He defines karma as maintaining the sum of positive and negative energy in the universe as exactly zero. It's a really fascinating take. He's grabbing this traditionally spiritual concept and grounding it in a very precise, almost pseudo-scientific framework. He's basically looking at the entire universe as an endless, perfectly balanced mathematical equation.
And to back this up, the text links his definition straight back to classical physics, specifically the first law of thermodynamics, which was formulated by the 19th century German physicist Rudolf Clausius. You might remember this from science class. In a closed system, the zero sum of positive and negative energy always remains zero. Well, Xu Feng argues that when you expand that thermodynamic concept to the entire universe, that massive energetic balancing act, that is exactly what we call karma.
So, simply put, the law of the conservation of energy is karma in his eyes. He takes this heavy physics analogy and ties it right back to a classic proverb we've all heard. As we sow, so shall we reap. For the author, these aren't just two similar ideas. They are identical concepts, describing the exact same universal machine. When you look at how this all plays out chronologically for an individual, it's pretty wild. The text states that your current trajectory was determined by the karma from your previous life. So by extension, your present situation right now is the strict result of yesterday's efforts. And those efforts you're putting in today, they're solely setting up the trajectory for your tomorrow and ultimately your future life. It's just one continuous, unbroken chain of cause and effect. Moving on to Section 3, the laws of cause and the author's real-world examples.
Now, the author actually points to modern geopolitics to illustrate this framework. When looking at major effects, like Iraqi President Saddam Hussein being ousted or the devastating 9/11 attacks in New York, he proposes specific underlying causes. Now, just to be clear, we are simply exploring the source material here to see how it strictly applies this philosophy to major historical events. But it is definitely striking to see how Su Feng insists that events like the invasion of Kuwait or the hardline foreign policies of the US government acted as direct karmic triggers. In his view, there is an absolute distinct cause for every single effect.
The text extends this premise even further, looking at broad national outcomes and even forces of nature. For instance, he questions why the United States has experienced such rapid prosperity in its relatively short history, while China historically dealt with long periods of poverty. He even points to natural phenomena, like massive sandstorms in northern China, or the sudden emergence of viruses like SARS and bird flu. Now, he doesn't name the exact specific karmic cause for every single one of these, but his overarching premise doesn't budge. There are definitive underlying causes for all of these macro-level events. In this framework, literally nothing is random. And zooming right back down to the micro level, he applies that exact same logic to your personal health, your education, and your social standing. Like, if someone suffers a heart attack, the text argues it didn't just happen out of the blue. It is a strict product of their medical history and their psychological state. Or think about education. Are people admitted to highly competitive doctoral programs overnight? Of course not. The author says it's due to natural endowments, family environments, and years of hard work. Even whether a person gets to sleep in a luxury 5-star hotel or unfortunately has to sleep on the streets. According to the author, all of it is the result of specific underlying causes on their predetermined track.
Section 4. Navigating Your Life's Track, a Guide to Action.
So Feng poses a really practical question here to pivot us away from all this heavy philosophical theory and back to our daily lives. He asks, so what good lies in jealousy, dissatisfaction, or disconcerting? Think about it. If you literally cannot jump onto Madonna's track or suddenly swap onto a billionaire's track, why waste your precious energy being bitter about the track you happen to be on? To answer that, the text lays out 4 specific steps for living what he calls a wise life. Step 1, take things as they are. 2, associate with others by following predestined relations. 3, act in accordance with your nature. And 4, take advantage of opportunities as they naturally arise. Basically, the text is offering up a mental framework for successfully navigating your predetermined life trajectory, rather than exhausting yourself by constantly trying to swim upstream against it. And that brings us to the ultimate twist in Feng's philosophy. He ends on this incredibly empowering yet kind of startling quote. The text asks, who designs and formulates the trajectories of life? Now, based on everything we just talked about, you might assume it's some sort of higher power. But the author firmly states it is not the greatest creator, not deities, celestial beings, not anyone but ourselves. Through our past actions and our own karmic balance, we are actually the architects of our own rigid tracks, which leaves us with a pretty profound question to ponder. If you wrote the code for the track you are riding on right now, what exactly are you doing today to design the trajectory of your tomorrow? Thank you for joining me on The Explainer. And as always, keep learning.